Welcome to The Culture of Healthcare, Privacy, Confidentiality, and Security. This is Lecture A. The component, The Culture of Healthcare, addresses job expectations in healthcare settings. It discusses how care is organized within a practice setting, privacy laws, and professional and ethical issues encountered in the workplace. The objectives for privacy, confidentiality, and security are to define and discern the differences between privacy, confidentiality, and security. Discuss the major methods for protecting privacy and confidentiality, including through the use of information technology. Describe and apply privacy, confidentiality, and security under the tenets of the HIPAA security rule. This unit defines these important terms and discusses reasons for concerns about privacy and security related to health information. Tools for protecting health information will be examined, followed by a discussion of the Healthcare Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA regulations, and what additions have been made in the High-Tech Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health Act legislation. This lecture discusses privacy and security. Privacy is one's right to keep information to oneself. It is the right to be left alone, the right to keep personal information secret, and in essence, the right to control personal information. Confidentiality, on the other hand, is one's right to keep information about oneself from being disclosed to other people. When a patient vests confidentiality in a physician and a healthcare system, it is expected that personal information is kept confidential and not disclosed to others. Data is only shared or disseminated to those with a need to know. Security is the activity of protecting personal information. It consists of mechanisms to assure the safety of data and the systems in which the data reside. Individually identifiable health information, or IIHI, is any data that can be correlated with an individual. For example, information in a medical record or a database that can be linked up to an individual. A related term is personal health information. This is individually identifiable health information as defined explicitly by the HIPAA privacy rule in the U.S. Finally, consent is actually a broader term, but it will be defined here in the context of privacy. When consent is given to the healthcare system, it entails written or verbal permission to allow use of individually identifiable health information for the activity of providing health care, or for participation in a research project or related activity. The remainder of this lecture focuses on concerns about privacy and security, beginning with concerns about privacy, followed by the notion of personal privacy versus the common good. The discussion continues with disclosures of personal health information, examining some of the concerns that the public has about the privacy of health information. Finally, the lecture will close with a few comments about de-identified data. Consider the notion of personal privacy versus the common good. Some of the concerns are well demonstrated in a video that was produced in 2004 by the American Civil Liberties Union, to which a link is provided. In this video, a pizza restaurant has access to customers' medical information, and they penalize them for things like ordering extra cheese when their cholesterol values are shown to be high. It is a video worth watching, even though it takes a very specific point of view. There is a broad spectrum of views here, oftentimes reflecting underlying political beliefs. At one end of the spectrum is the view that while personal privacy is important, there are some instances when the common good of society outweighs personal privacy. An example that is often given is biosurveillance, whether it is monitoring emerging natural diseases or things like bioterrorism. Early intervention and response is possible with more information. Another example is clinical research. When more clinical research is conducted, the ability to provide quality health care is increased. The other end of the spectrum holds that personal privacy trumps everything, that there should really be no reason to violate one's privacy without explicit consent. Some of the organizations that are prominent in promoting this point of view include the Privacy Rights Clearinghouse, that has written specifically about medical information, even though they typically deal with broader privacy rights topics. Another group is called PatientPrivacyRights.org, which is headed by Dr. Deborah Peel, a Texas psychiatrist who was very well known and outspoken on personal privacy. Others have called for a more balanced approach between personal privacy and the common good. For more information on this topic, some good articulations of this can be found in documents from the California Healthcare Foundation, an editorial by Dr. Don Detmer, and a policy paper from the American College of Physicians. As with many ethical issues, there are no explicitly right or wrong answers, and each individual has to decide where their views fall on the spectrum. However, the U.S. political process, not the individual, will more than likely determine how personal privacy and common good in terms of healthcare are balanced. It is important to know about patient information disclosure and how to prevent it from happening in the future. One particularly egregious story happened in Portland, Oregon on New Year's Eve, 2005. On that date, an individual left in his car a number of discs, backup tapes, and other media that contained the records of about 365,000 patients who were seen by a visiting nurse association. This naturally received a lot of press and demonstrated the need to be careful and not, for example, leave items in your car, especially if they contained personal health information. The Veterans Administration system has had a number of episodes, probably the largest of which was when a laptop with data of over 1 million veterans was stolen. The laptop was recovered and it appeared that the data was not accessed. But of course, no one knows exactly what went on with the machine when it was in the hands of those who stole it. More recent data shows that disclosures continue to be a problem. 2 websites are devoted to ongoing documentation of the problem. The Privacy Rights Clearinghouse provides a searchable chronology of data breaches. The data includes medical breaches, but is not limited to them. The site can be linked to from www.privacyrights.org/data-breach. The Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, is now required under the HITECH Act to post a list of breaches of unsecured protected health information affecting 500 or more individuals. It is called by some their wall of shame. It can be accessed at www.hhs.gov/OCR/privacy/HIPAA/breach notification rule/breach tool.html. By the end of 2001, this site has documented 380 incidents affecting 18,059,831 individuals. The Ponemon Institute publishes an annual report on the impact of security breaches on healthcare organizations. The 2011 report found that the number of breaches increased by 32% over 2010. It also found that the average cost per breach to an organization was $2.2 million and took 1 to 6 months to resolve. A significant part of the cost was lost business by the organization. About 41% of the breaches were discovered as a result of a patient complaint. The top causes of data breaches were unintentional employee action, lost or stolen computing devices, or third-party problems. Of note, most organizations believe their EHR makes data more secure. There are newer challenges from the proliferation of health IT technologies and applications. For example, there is an ever-growing use of electronic data in clinical workflows. Likewise, Health Information Exchange, HIE, moves data across networks, and cloud computing alters the perimeter of data protection. There are also new models of healthcare, such as accountable care organizations, ACOs, that require more members of a team to access information. Finally, clinicians want to increasingly use their own devices, such as personal laptops, tablet devices, smartphones, and so forth. And of course, technology itself can worsen the problem. A widely cited study by Wright looked at the USB drives commonly plugged into computers, sometimes called thumb drives. These drives run a program that enables their use when they are plugged in, and that program can be modified to extract data from the computer. So if that computer has personal health information on it, the thumb drive can basically copy it off the computer. There are many people who have developed personal health record systems based on tools like Microsoft Access, which has some encryption functionality, but is very easily compromised. Another interesting analysis found that 10% of hard drives sold by second-hand retailers in Canada had remnants of personal health information, PHI, on them. Often when computers are disposed of, the hard drives are not completely wiped clean, potentially providing access to personal information to the next user, if they know how to extract it. Also of note is that PHI can be discovered by files available from peer-to-peer file sharing networks. One analysis found that half of 1% of all IP addresses on the Internet in the U.S. have discoverable PHI. Finally, another technology that can store PHI is the digital photocopier, which stores all copies on an internal hard disk. If the information is compromised, PHI can potentially be leaked. Two analyses have shown that healthcare organizations are not well prepared for security challenges. A report by Deloitte, the consulting firm, looked at security issues in healthcare organizations and came to the following conclusions. The primary threat to information is data leakage, or data that gets out in the routine care of patients. The report also concluded that identity and access management is a top priority. The trend towards outsourcing of IT in healthcare organizations raises many third-party security concerns. The role of the Chief Information Security Officer or Chief Security Officer in most healthcare organizations, particularly large ones, then takes on greater significance. Every decision about information systems needs to be assessed from the standpoint of security. This report also found that despite the increasing complexity of the security environment and the growing number of regulations, the budgets of financially strapped healthcare organizations were not keeping pace with security needs. The annual Security Readiness Survey by HIMSS Analytics reached roughly the same conclusions. Healthcare organizations in general are not keeping pace with security threats and readiness. This analysis found, for example, that 85% of organizations share electronic data, but only 61% perform a risk analysis annually or more frequently. One question to ask is, what is the role of government in protecting privacy and confidentiality? This discussion will begin by looking at the U.S. and then move to other countries. In the U.S., the National Center for Vital and Health Statistics, or NCVHS, has weighed in over the years on a number of privacy and security issues. In 2006, it released a set of 26 recommendations for policies concerning health privacy for the nationwide health information network. Further recommendations have been released for personal control of health information, and again called for a consistent and coherent policy. Another activity has been the HISP-C effort, the Health Information Security and Privacy Collaboration, a project funded by the government that looked at 42 states and territories and assessed the various approaches and laws to privacy. A wide range of privacy policies were found, and it was concluded that a nationwide approach would be difficult due to the sometimes conflicting laws. There probably needs to be more harmonization of privacy laws, as more health information exchanges that move personal health information across state lines are developed. More recently, the Office of the National Coordinator for Health Information Technology, ONC, has established a Privacy and Security Tiger Team charged with developing policies and vetting them with other ONC policy and standards committees. The U.S. is not the only government that has been addressing privacy. In fact, the European Commission has devoted even more efforts to the protection of individual privacy. The Directive 95/46/EC is a set of fairly stringent rules that essentially allows data processing only with consent, or in some highly specific circumstances, such as a legal obligation, or what is defined as public necessity, usually revolving around public health. The countries that implement this directive provide examples of how consent around information could be used for efforts in the U.S. in the nationwide health information network. There are a number of related issues for medical privacy. One of these issues, and again, there is no right or wrong answer, is who owns medical information. As the articles by Hall and Rodwin point out, historically the owner of the information medium was considered to be the owner of the information. For example, if an office practice or hospital had paper charts and had bought and owned the paper the charts were printed on, It was presumed that the practice or hospital owned the information on that paper. However, in the electronic era, information moves freely across networks from one system to another, and ownership of that information becomes less clear. In fact, a growing view is that the patient owns their own information. As the amount of information increases, there is an increased economic value to health systems, pharmaceutical companies, and others who may want to use that data for various purposes. The article by Rodwin, in particular, argues that when there is an economic advantage gained by the use of that information, then at least some of that gain should be shared back to the patient. Another concern is compelled disclosures of information. That is, even though laws and regulations may highly protect information, individuals may sometimes be compelled to disclose information for non-clinical care reasons in the healthcare setting. Healthcare providers need to be aware of requiring individuals to disclose information that is not really being used for health-related activities. Another growing issue concerns the human genome, which may be a person's ultimate personal identifier. A person's genome is what makes them an individual. Individual genes and the variation that they have from others' genes are unequivocally unique to each person. Health information can be de-identified, but with genomic information, individuals may be easily identifiable. Access to the genomic information manifests itself in a number of ways. For example, a person's genome can be identified by the genomic information in their siblings. There are a growing number of genome-wide association studies, where an attempt is made to associate variation in an individual's genome with different diseases. There is usually a requirement for researchers to put this data in public databanks, although usually the individual personal information is protected, with the exception of the researchers who can legitimately get to that information. It is not too difficult to identify who the individual is from that data, so as research moves forward with genomics and personalized medicine, more privacy issues will come to the fore. Another number of organizations have tried to define health information rights. One example is the Declaration of Health Data Rights, which comes from a group of mostly personal health record (PHR) vendors, accessible at healthdatarights.org. This group advocates that individuals should all have the right to own their own health data. They should also have the right to know the source of each health data element. In addition, individuals should have the right to take possession of a complete copy of their individual health data without delay, at minimal or no cost. If data exists in computable form, it must be made available in that form. Finally, individuals should have the right to share their health data with others as they see fit. The American Health Information Management Association, AHIMA, also has a Health Information Bill of Rights that is slightly more detailed but has similar provisions. When data is referred to as being de-identified, this refers to the removal of personally identifying characteristics of the data, such as name or address, or other fields that make up personal health information. Is de-identified secure? It may not always be as secure as intended. One researcher, Dr. LaTanya Sweeney, brought this to light and has received notice in the popular press. When she was completing her PhD at MIT, she did a widely cited study that essentially identified William Weld, the governor of Massachusetts at the time, from information found by linking up the publicly available data sources. Her research also showed that 87% of the U.S. population could be uniquely identified by their 5-digit zip code, gender, and date of birth. So when relatively common data elements are combined, individual identities may be easily identified. In the case of William Weld, Dr. Sweeney was able to access a health insurance database for state employees, and Governor Weld was obviously a state employee, and she was also able to purchase the voter registration list for the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts, where he lived. She then combined these two databases, linking up the zip code, gender, and date of birth, and was able to identify the governor, as will be demonstrated further in the next slide. While it has been found that genomic data can be generated in clinical research studies, some recent research has shown how Social Security numbers of individuals can be predicted from public data because so many datasets have Social Security numbers. This slide demonstrates how Governor Weld was identified. On the left is the so-called De-Identified State Employee Health Database, which includes state employees' ethnicity, visits to healthcare providers, diagnosis, procedures, medications, and charges. It also contained zip codes, dates of birth, and gender. The Cambridge Voter Registration Database included name, address, registered party affiliation, and the same zip codes, date of births, and gender. Governor Weld was one of those 87% who had a unique combination of zip code, date of birth, and gender. So Dr. Sweeney was able to take Weld's voter registration information and then access his entire medical information. This was picked up by the national media and at the same time caused quite a stir. This concludes Lecture A of Privacy, Confidentiality, and Security. In summary, it is important to distinguish between privacy, which is the right to keep information to oneself, from confidentiality, which is the right to keep information about oneself from being disclosed to others. For many reasons, breaches and disclosures of patient information are increasing. In addition, the concept of de-identified information is not necessarily as secure as originally thought.